So last week I saw Guillermo del Toro's new adaptation of Frankenstein in 35 millimeter at the Britannia Theater here in New Orleans. And let me just tell y'all, digital projection is just a crime against humanity. It must be said. I don't care who hears me say it. There's nothing quite like watching a movie, especially kind of a big, lavish movie, on film with a big crowd. It's just the best. But I have to say, I did not like this movie. So I don't think that anything that made the original novel by Mary Shelley interesting made it into this adaptation, which I really think is a crying shame. So the first thing I noticed that I thought was like, oh God, here we go, was the setting. So GDT updated the setting from the 1790s in the original novel to the 1850s in this adaptation, which to me just seems like a very baffling choice. Now, if I had to guess, I would think that he's kind of trying to make it more kind of Victorian Gothic, going more for that sort of iconic look that Coppola really pioneered in terms of the really kind of colorful, sort of sensuous Gothic of Bram Stoker's Dracula. You know, James Whale's movies work because they're in the 30s, right? You know, post-World War I, Holocaust is about to happen, the nuclear bomb is about to happen, right? Kind of early 20th century dark science really kind of jives, I think, with this story. And of course, you know, kind of nothing beats the original 1790s setting of the novel, right? The dawn of the Industrial Revolution, right? Sort of on the precipice of this massive societal change for the whole planet. And I think that kind of like, you know, the sort of incarnation of the creature as this sort of like representation of modernity kind of willed into unnatural existence is such a pivotal part of what makes the story interesting for me, and that I think was just completely lost in this kind of vague 1850s setting. Oscar Isaac is way too old to play Victor Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein just kind of must be this precocious young scientist. I just don't think that it's like, you know, I just think there's something fundamentally lost about the character when he is played by an older actor, right? It's like Hamlet. You know, we've all seen like Hamlet played by 50-year-olds with, you know, sort of some unconvincing makeup, trying to make them you know, look a little bit younger, and it just doesn't work. You know, Hamlet should be played by a young man. It's a young man's part. And as the movie kind of progresses in its first act, we see a little too much of Victor's childhood, but we do get a lot of wonderful production design, a lot of wonderful costume design. Mia Goth's costumes were especially incredible. I really liked how she was sort of in green and blue, right? This very, literally the colors of planet Earth. And then Victor's mother wore red, and basically the more red that Mia Goth wore, the more Oscar Isaac was attracted to her, which I thought was like very nice and freaky and Freudian. Incredible production design. I mean, really kind of has that Bram Stoker's Dracula idea of the costumes are the sets. And GDT has made Victor, you know, the son of a baron, like he is in the James Whale films. You know, again, I just don't like that change. I don't like how, you know, Victor is a member of the aristocracy, that he, instead of, you know, a Genovese kind of, you know, like bourgeois Republican. I think that's a nice touch that's sort of exclusive to the setting that Shelley was working with. That's just like a nice little detail. That's like, it just gets lost a little bit, you know? Now, of course, that's not to say that like everything has to be exactly like it was in the book, but I think that what GDT is doing is just simply less interesting than what Shelley was doing. Another James Whale influence was clearly in the reanimation scene, right? We have Victor in this huge, hulking, kind of phallic tower. And while, again, the design was like very beautiful and very pretty and gorgeous to look at, I mean, I think it isn't anything new, right? If I wanted to watch the James Whale movies, which have a lovely crumbling tower and, you know, and that sort of grand kind of sense of scale, then I would watch the James Whale movies. I mean, they're incredible, right? I kind of just don't need another rehash of what's already been done, you know, almost at this point 100 years ago. I think it's a real missed opportunity kind of not to go back to the sort of creepy simplicity of the book, right? Sort of like animating this you know, homunculus in your apartment, right? Like by the light of a single guttering candle. It's just such a intimate, weird, creepy image, right? I mean, I sort of see that scene in the book as being kind of more of the vibe of like a 14-year-old masturbating, in the soft glow of his laptop, right? It's just not like this sort of grand, huge, these giant batteries and sparks flying and oh my God, and this is like an enormous thing. It just seems like a little too Catholic, which is another sort of huge, I guess, not criticism, because it really is obviously very subjective, but I think like it's a disconnect that I have with this adaptation, is that it's just oozing with Catholicism, oozing with Catholicism. My first thoughts when the credits rolled were, Mary Shelley was a Jacobin vegetarian, James Whale, the director of the Frankenstein films from the 30s, was a gay atheist, anti-fascist. Neither of them would have been into this Catholic shit. When Victor brings the creature to life, he goes, "It is finished," and lightning strikes outside and a big storm starts, like the storm above Golgotha and the crucifixion. Obviously the monster himself is sort of elevated on this big crucifix. I mean, it like could not get more blatant than that. In Shelley's world, right, the fact that there is no Christian God makes it scarier, right? There's no metaphysical guardrails to the violation and plundering of nature. Humanity is its own agent. You get the sense that sort of Mother Nature in the novel is like not powerful enough to just be like, oh, I'm going to put a stop to this. You know what I mean? Like just the fact that humanity is able to kind of like do these horrible things and get away with it makes it a much creepier kind of cosmic tale than just this like boring Christian shit. Honestly, I think Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is a better Frankenstein adaptation than Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, because it's really situated in that early 19th century kind of romantic period where the sublime really takes center stage, and it's genuinely creepy, right? I mean, I think sort of whatever direction you want to take Frankenstein in, I think it should be very creepy, very, very off-putting. I rewatched First Reformed this week, the incredible Paul Schrader movie, and what I really love about that is that it has this sort of like sinking sense of dread of this idea that we're going through a dying world. And I think that was very much on Shelley's mind when she was writing Frankenstein, right in the midst of The Year Without a Summer, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. I think today with climate change, the big tech, AI, all income inequality, all of this sort of stuff, it's like very much like we're kind of just waiting for the axe to fall. We're kind of just like, oh God, what's going to happen? When's it going to happen? And I didn't feel anything like that in this new Frankenstein. All I felt instead was melodrama. And, once the creature comes to life, I'll just come out and say it, he's way too hot. He is a smoke show, and I'm sorry, it like completely fucking ruins that character. It is, the whole point of the creature, whether it's in the book or in the better adaptations, is that it is impossible for him to find companionship. He is too hideous to be loved. But in this movie, there's like 5 fucking people who are perfectly happy to be a companion to the creature. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of that character. And then the creature is invincible for some fucking reason. So the whole idea of Frankenstein's monster being invincible and impervious to death comes from the Universal films, the bad ones, because basically what they needed to do was keep bringing him back for the next movie. So they just did this very contrived thing where they were like, oh, he's invincible, he's indestructible, he can't die. Not only is this just like dumb and makes no sense, there's just like no reason for it to be in this one. Like, it's like, this is like a prestige adaptation. Why are we like plumbing the depths of like Universal, slop? And one of my least favorite sequences was with the cottagers. The creature is given his kind of like Walden Pond scene where he's like feeding a stag out of his hand and he's communing with nature, and then the stag immediately gets shot through the fucking face, and then the hunters are the cottagers, and the hunter and the cottagers are like shepherds. And here's where the Catholic thing kind of comes back in. There's a scene where a bunch of wolves behave like velociraptors and like rush in and murder David Bradley and like and kill a bunch of sheep and stuff. And apart from just the frustration of like wild animals behaving like slasher movie villains, I understand that this is kind of a fairy tale, and it's sort of like, and GDT's very into that kind of fairy tale aesthetic, and, the dark woods and the wicked wolves and all that kind of stuff fits in very well with that. But, it is very much situated within this Christian ecological hierarchy of kind of the shepherd, the pastoral lifestyle. The woods are dark and evil. The wolf is a kind of competitor for human ecological dominance, right? And I think for Shelley, I mean, I didn't know her personally, but like I've got a pretty good idea. I think for Shelley, and you see this in Frankenstein, the wilderness, the wild, was a source of fascination, of beauty, of harmony, right? That like even these carnivorous animals had their place within this this balance. And then, what I think is the real kind of protein of the original novel, when, the sort of like cat and mouse game between Victor and the creature completely glossed over in this adaptation, essentially condensed to just like a scene in which a bunch of characters are killed off, and then all of a sudden we're in the Arctic and we're kind of like back into our framing device. And, I just thought it was like a very bizarre choice in terms of pacing. I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people are kind of ready for another Frankenstein adaptation, because I think, like a lot of folks at the sort of dawn of the Industrial Revolution, I think a lot of us are kind of sensing that society is changing incredibly quickly, that we're on kind of the dawn of an age of humanity that's going to be sort of radically different from the one that came before it, and that, the people kind of behind a lot of these changes are just like not really going about it thoughtfully or morally. But I think in the direction that he's taken this story, the more salient aspects of Frankenstein that might kind of connect with 21st century people in that specific way are completely lost. It becomes instead this very intensely interpersonal drama. And I think if that's your thing, that's really cool. But I wanted more, and I was pretty disappointed. No shade whatsoever to Guillermo del Toro or anybody who worked on this movie. All of you are incredibly talented. Just wasn't for me.